Hey everyone, welcome to the TDR Traded Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Thanks for checking in. Why is it important you have to listen to today's podcast? Well, we like to feature some of the best thought leaders in both the cannabis and psychedelic space, and we're not disappointing today as we bring in the chief operating officer of arguably the most popular cannabis stock in the industry, Dan Ahrens from Advisor Shares, as we talk about their ETF MSOs and really trying to make sense of what's been going on the last week or two and what we can anticipate as we go deeper into Q4 to provide you insight and, again, feature some of the best thought leaders in the space. So let's get right to it in our podcast here today as we welcome our two co-hosts, lead financial writer of TDR, Benjamin A. Smith. Good to see you, along with millennial entrepreneur and TDR contributor, Anthony Verrill. All right, gents, I mentioned Advisor Shares and their ETF as we kick off our first segment into the wire. Basically outlining all the major headlines. So Advisor Shares ETF, one of their holdings is Air Wellness, who today announced a restructuring in debt, Anthony. So what did some of the numbers include? And I guess how will this debt structure impact the company's financial outlook and, more importantly, their stakeholders?
Yes, I mean, this was surprising. There's a lot to unpack here. Essentially, they've restructured all 400 million of the outstanding debt. They're going to silo it into a new co. They're going to slap a 13% coupon on it versus a 12.5% coupon that it yields now, kick it down the road to 2026, and essentially be able to convert it to 30% equity in the business, fully diluted, at the completion of the deal. Now, I mean, as I was kind of thinking about this morning, we're not really privy to the actual docs of the deal. I don't know if there's any provisions that Air can start to actually pay down that debt and eat into it from the free cash flow going forward. So that's something to be considered. It's not, they don't have a date with 30% dilution down the road. However, from a financial perspective, as it stands today, they do look better in the immediate term. Granted, they're going to be paying around 52 million annually in debt service over the next 3 years until the completion of the deal. It had a mixed reaction online. Stock traded down, I think, about 5.5% today, not on very heavy volume.
Yeah.
I'd say it's a net positive, and it's interesting.
Did you say 52 million annually?
Yeah, I mean, do the 13% on 400 million.
Yeah. Seems doable if we get some sort of legislation movement. What do you think of the news, Ben?
Yeah, I thought it was sort of a necessary evil. I mean, there is some dilution involved, obviously here, but they needed to push back their debt because they had a lot of debt maturing later this year in December 2024. So this is something that they had to do. I think one of the saving graces here is that unlike some companies in the space, they have a fairly low share count and shares outstanding, so they're able to probably absorb this better than some others. But all in all, I think deferral of the debt is what they had to do. And, that gives them time for Catalyst to come through and hopefully to generate the free cash flow that we all expect.
Catalyst come through. That's what we're all hoping. Well, to find out more, let's get his thoughts on it as well. Let's bring in actually the chief operating officer, Advisor Shares, ETF MSOs, Dan Ahrens. It's been a while since we had you on the podcast, but let's bring Dan in. Good to see you, sir. And how are things? And what do you think of that announcement that Air Wellness made today?
Well, thanks for having me on. It's good to be here. I can't say I'm thrilled with everything happening in the market, but we are surviving and moving forward. So with Air, Anthony said they did kick the can down the road for a couple of years. That makes perfect sense. That's exactly what they did. And what other choices do they really have? I mean, I'd really like to see a company, pay down debt from free cash flow, maybe see, equity raise if it's, at the market or better. But this isn't so bad. The other thing is, would we be invested in Air at all or in any cannabis stocks if we weren't counting on the federal reform?
Yeah.
Of course, we're counting on the federal reform. We're hoping for it sooner rather than later. And Air is a company that is going to be extremely volatile. It is spring-loaded. When we get some news, it's going to skyrocket a little bit more than others. No promises there because this is all if and when things happen, we think. So it's fine with me because I expect them to completely restructure or pay down that debt long before then, when we get some federal reform.
Yeah. Fire away, gents.
I mean, I think Dan brings up a great point. One question that we've been asked, and I mean, it's something that's gone on a lot around Twitter, is with Ascend. Is there any reason why Ascend is not included in the MSOS index? Or, I mean, is there a certain criteria that you guys are looking at with certain issuers?
Well, it's it's not an index, and so
No.
every stock, we're selecting, and I would say it's due diligence. Everybody do your own due diligence.
Okay. Yeah.
There's hardly any time frames that stock would have added to the fund's performance. I know it popped last week. Cheers to them on some good earnings, but besides last week. No, people ought to say, hey, Dan, good job on avoiding that stock.
Yeah.
Instead of asking me questions about it.
Yeah. Ben, go ahead, bud.
Now, Dan, I wanted to actually ask you about the structure of the fund. I know there's a lot of speculation. Probably one of the hot topics is how MSOs plays into some of the the ARB spreads and all the activity that goes on the underlying on the CSC. So I want to ask, how are the swaps involved with that in terms of the price action that happens on the CSE and sometimes the volatility you see there?
Yeah, and I'm really happy to talk about this stuff because, and if somebody doesn't know, we also have our own Alpha Nooner every day at noon on various platforms. I'm on it virtually every Tuesday. But I'm happy to be on here with you guys because we talk about this stuff, and hopefully this is a little different audience, and hey, we want to educate up on this. So remember, everybody, we're talking about cannabis stocks listed on small exchanges in Canada for the most part, traded OTC in the United States. OTC stocks in the US have no NYSE closing auction. Their microcap stocks are volatile as hell. We said that when we launched this fund. Yeah. And then, so no one would be surprised by extreme volatility and prices that can be pushed around, sometimes with, tens of thousands of dollars of notional or less, or a couple 100,000 shares. So no one should be surprised by anything going on in these stocks. I'm still going to come back and answer your question, Ben. The other thing is, we do, because we're in the ETF business, we compare ourselves to other ETFs out there. Heck, I like to think Tim Seymour's a friend. He's a great guy, a smart guy.
Yep.
MSOs is outperforming his fund this year. Now, we don't go bragging on our performance because we're down. Everybody knows we're down. Cannabis stocks are down. So please, I want to caveat this. This is not advisor shares pounding our chest with look at our performance. But if people ask questions about MSOS, the fund, and its structure, and every time we buy shares, we got to pay a commission. Most of the fund is in total return swaps. Total return swaps aren't free. We've never hid that fact. They're not too expensive. We're paying like SOFR plus a small percentage. It's in our annual report. We have a couple different counterparties, but we also have a ton in cash because it's collateral for the swaps, and interest rates have gone up. So we're earning a ton of interest on those. Is there a spread? Of course there's a spread, there's a cost. So I didn't mean to pick on Tim Seymour because he has a real good fund too. But if you look at all the cannabis ETFs, all of them out there, it's MJ and there's a handful of others. Again, not bragging on our performance, but we're sucking a little bit less than the others this year. So even though those other funds aren't getting inflows, we have a ton of money to manage. We pay commissions every time we're buying these stocks. MSOS this calendar year is still the best performing. So There were a lot of questions last year about when the fund would get inflows, and it's not an index. I would still decide when we're putting that money to work or not putting that money to work. Sometimes we'd hold back a little bit of cash cushion. We were never holding back cash cushion for redemptions. That's dumb. ETFs aren't supposed to hold cash. It's a portfolio manager choice if we were holding a little bit of cash because we didn't put it to work all at once. But we were pushing around those prices sometimes to undue effect. And what we've done in the last 6-9 months or year is communicated even more with all the market makers out there. And we're saying, hey, Mr. Market Maker, Mrs. Market Maker, if you are creating shares of this fund, usually an ETF gets all the shares delivered in kind. We have all these total return swaps. So we get cash in lieu of all those positions. So you got a market maker out there building up positions, creating units of the fund, which is just the normal process of an ETF. But then they need to dump shares of GTI, of Curaleaf, of Verano, of TerraSend, all the others. So we've communicated to most of the market makers out there. Some of them keep themselves masked. We don't know exactly who they are, but most of them we have good communication with. And we say, hey, call up our counterparty and ask them if they want to buy those shares. So sometimes I get alerts of, hey, we got a natural seller out there selling shares. Do you want to buy them? And I say, yes, I will buy those shares. So we're sometimes people are saying, what's up with these shares traded after the close? Well, they're actually on the close. And when there's a creation in the fund or redemption in the fund, we are taking in that inventory, taking out that inventory, not having undue volatility in the fund. And that's why some people say, oh, why are they buying shares today? Because money came into the fund. It's supposed to go into shares.
Yeah.
We found a smoother way to do it. Oh, why is Dan selling at these prices? I'm not choosing to sell. There was a small redemption in the fund. It takes out a representative slice of a bunch of shares. And again, without undue volatility in the stocks or in the fund. And we think we're doing what's right for the shareholders.
Yeah. How are you best preparing as we get into an earnings season here? Is it like kind of a conservative approach? Like, you look at, an earnings season. This earnings season feels a little bit different than previous quarters, knowing some of the news that we got back in September. However, soon after that is tax loss selling season. So it's kind of a tricky time because we are thinking that we're going to probably get some pretty positive earnings reports. However, that, segues into tax loss selling season. So what's the best approach, or how are you guys handling that moving forward into next, or I should say we're now into the month of November?
Well, a question, comes to me as a portfolio manager of the fund: is information or knowledge or even conjecture going to change the way the fund's investing?
Okay.
So some stocks might have, a little bit more, better anticipated earnings than others, such as, great exposure to Maryland. Everybody's in love with Maryland right now for good reason. But for the most part, it's not going to change the way I'm investing the fund. So I need to back up a step and say, I said this is not an index, it's an actively managed fund. But again, we're talking about OTC traded cannabis stocks.
Yeah.
I'm not managing this thing tactically.
Yeah.
That would be insane. I'm not going to suddenly dump a bunch of TrueLeaf and buy a bunch of something else. No, these things, they're liquid, but they're not that liquid, and I don't want to put any undue bid pressure on any of these names. So I'm kind of keeping head down, focus, move forward. Earnings upcoming, I'm looking forward to them. I'm hearing some good things.
Yep.
But it ain't gonna change the way I invest.
So status quo. However, let me go even further. Come Jan 1, and we start to see more and more, I guess, feedback from the DEA, and if it remains positive. I know that's
You're waiting until Jan 1 for that? I'm not.
All right. Good to know. What do you think? You know, if we have a lot of things that potentially could materialize, like how are you looking at 2024, the calendar year? Like, is this finally the year that we finally break through and what we've been talking about over the past however many years?
Yeah, I have to control myself of being, level-headed and, just doing my job and
Yeah.
managing the fund as we best can, and being hopeful. Okay, because I'm invested in my own fund myself, and the 2 times levered fund MSOX, and our, more of a global strategy YOLO. So yeah, I'm hopeful for things.
Okay.
But again, we've been burned for 2.5 years now, haven't we? Hearing things were coming, hearing promises, hearing lots of things from our wonderful, House representatives and especially the senators. So I am hearing, hey, have you guys heard anything to the negative that the DEA is not going to approve the HHS recommendation? I would
None.
say no. I don't think
No.
anybody's heard a word.
If anything, this morning they're upping the quota of their requested psilocybin and cannabis stocks for research potential.
What's that?
So, if anything, that's a flashing green light.
So I have little birds talking in my ear all the time, and we don't put much weight in them. We like to hear things, but we never know if they're true. I hear that the DEA acceptance of the recommendation might be imminent, like this month. No promises, of course. That's just stuff we hear. Some stuff we hear comes true, some stuff doesn't. But we really do think it's imminent. I can't say in what time frame, but it might be sooner rather than later. Now that opens up a whole other can of worms. Is there, how much of a comment period is it going to be? We all hear that we've all called it the Garland memo now. We don't know if it's actually being called the Garland memo. We hear that is already, prepared. It's already been all, worked behind the scenes, but we don't know if that Garland memo is going to come out when the DEA accepts that recommendation, or they might keep it in the drawer until after comment period and so on. But we hear the Garland memos out there. It's going to help define, Schedule 3 drugs are particularly prescription drugs. They're not, go to dispensary drugs. So they got to cover that. They got to cover adult use and, states' rights, which they can do. Now, both of those things still aren't legalization, of course. So we don't know what that does to safe harbor for banks and for listing exchanges, which we all think is coming in some form or fashion. We just can't say when. I'm going to say, I think this DEA recommendation might be coming a whole lot sooner rather than later. I think that could be a big boost, even though it's still not, it's not the end of the line. It's just the DEA has now recommended it. Exactly.
Well, we love to do this, especially I do in the media, speculation time. When you say a whole lot sooner, like, what did you hear? Are you like, I've heard timelines. We could have something by the end of Q1 2024. If you're saying a whole lot sooner, like, are you thinking it's sooner than that?
Yeah, but I'm only talking about the DEA saying, yes, we agree with this recommendation.
So no real definitive answer. Yeah.
Yeah. So Shad, when you say, oh, we could have something by Q1, what does that something really mean? That's when you get into all the weeds of this stuff.
Do you anticipate though, like another run like we had in September, if they do just a generic comment? I guess it remains to be seen on what that comment will entail, right?
Yeah. So again, I'm so used to compliance and not being promissory here.
Yeah, I was like, it's a nightmare. That's a nightmare question.
Gotta ask it.
The HHS letter. Well, see, here's the thing about that HHS letter that I want to remind people of. What was happening the day before that HHS letter came out? Does anybody remember? Did anybody have any inkling that it was coming? Was there any rumors? Was there any talk? Was there any hearings? Was there any? So it just suddenly came out. And that's the way the DEA acceptance is going to come out too. Everybody is so damn focused on what's happening with SAFE and the House representatives and the speaker, and there's going to be a government shutdown. that's because you can see and feel all that stuff.
Yeah,
You
of
get all
course.
the news, you get all the steps. And that is so much less impactful than this rescheduling is.
100%.
And that rescheduling is going to come, it's going to pop up one day out of left field. And okay, predictions here. We're suddenly going to see all these stocks spike 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, 100% for all I know.
That announcement
No
kind of
promises.
reminded me from 5 years ago when Canopy got the check from Constellation. That just was out of nowhere. And same thing, like we were contemplating, where is this industry going? I don't know what we were thinking, but needless to say, to answer your question, I can't remember the day before because there wasn't much going on, but obviously the next day things changed, right?
Yeah. And while we're being predictive here, another thing to remember, some people say, hey, Dan, well, why do all these stocks suck in the meantime if everybody really thinks this is coming? Well, we have to remember a couple of things. We all live in a bubble of cannabis investors.
Yeah.
I was just at the Schwab conference last week in Philadelphia. We had a couple advisors there that are investors in the fund, and they say hi. 98% of investors, though, they still chuckle when you say cannabis. They still say things like, no way. Oh, no, we're not allowed to do that. Oh, no, that's just a terrible investment, is it? And that's an investment advisor. That's not even a retail investor. So until we get this news,
of course,
we see very little buying pressure. The fund is one of the very few buyers out there. So I do, besides the creation redemption I talked about earlier, I do swoop in sometimes late in the afternoon and support some stock prices. If somebody's saying, hey, fund, why are you buying this stock or that stock? You might want to look at what its stock price was, mid-afternoon. It might be a stock that was down 15% and with very little dollar value, with just 10,000 shares or 100,000 shares. I can sometimes support those stock prices. So the fund is one of the very few buyers out there on any given average day. And there's a lot of red until this news hits. And until the news hits, I'm just going to keep driving the bus.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to keep trading sideways. Like yesterday, we were up, but the entire top 75% of my screen was green. Today, it's red, and it's just going to be going and going and going until we get some clarity.
But
something else we haven't talked about here is, I was wondering on Thursday and Friday what the hell was going on, because the lawsuit got filed. I was thinking that's a real positive thing. And the stocks got ugly, ugly, ugly. Now, on Monday morning, it all made sense when we heard about Trainer Ridge. I think you guys are up to speed on that probably, and there's only so much we can talk about. But, a fund unwinding and forced selling, indiscriminate selling down of some prices. And, again, that'd be a whole nother podcast. But we think that is now passed pretty well.
Do you think that we actually start to trade on fundamentals as a sector on the back end, on the back end of this regulatory shift once it's concrete?
Okay, as long as you're talking that far down the line.
I'm talking about pen on paper. Everything is signed, sealed, and actually put into motion, not just conjecture.
It sucks to be investors in equity and just to stay talking about fundamentals is stupid. Even in the meantime, do some stocks perform better than others? Do some get some up? Of course they do. And again, look at the companies that are knocking out of the park in Maryland is a great example. That's good. That's fundamentals. But we got to admit that this entire sector is completely dependent on the federal reform, because that bleeds over into bank custody and uplisting and institutional investment, everything else that's connected to it. And once that overhang is lifted or partially lifted, then good old fundamentals become a whole lot more important, as they should.
Ben's just sitting there quietly not getting really into this speculation stuff. He's a realist, understands what's at stake, right, buddy?
Well, I'm just taking it all in. I'm still playing in my head the comments about how it's just going to happen in left field and how you think it could happen imminently or fairly imminently. So I think that's anybody's watching the stream right now. I think that's news to their ears.
Yeah, it's going to drop. I believe that the DEA is going to drop the announcement with no warning. It's just going to be.
Of course they are. Yeah. The problem is that if you're counting on that, what the hell happened last Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday and Monday? Everybody lost their tails.
Yeah.
So Dan, can I ask you, what do you think, in your own opinion, from what you're hearing, what's the process of what comes after? So say the DEA allows it to happen, that comes out of left field December 1st. What is the process to actually get that enacted and on the books so that the MSOs can realize all the benefits from it?
Now, first of all, I'm not an attorney, and I don't know all the steps as well as some other people do that really follow Washington a little bit better. Again, I'm driving the aircraft carrier here. That's the fun. So after the DEA accepts the recommendation, I hear there's going to be comment period. I don't know how long that's going to be. It does go back to the DOJ to put things actually into action. And we got to have that Garland memo that supposedly exists. Supposedly, we can't see it and touch it. You got to have that added to add clarity to the things I talked about earlier, like what does a Schedule 3 drug mean to the existing medical marijuana states, and what does that do to the it's a multi-billion-dollar industry and employing tens of thousands of Americans, so they're not going to get rid of the adult use industry, of course. We got to have the Garland memo for that. So first of all, Ben, to answer your question, is I don't know. And
but there's going to be a few steps. But in my view, it kind of sucks that we completely retraced from the HHS.
Yeah.
Unless you're, a real good trader around that, cheers to you. But I have a big belief that when that DEA recommendation comes out, that could be a big pop. Could there be a little bit of a retracement after that? Sure. But I think
when you say recommendation, like the first response since the HHS announcement, or recommendation meaning like, is that
the DEA is going to say we accept this HHS recommendation and also agree to make this a Schedule 3. Now, then the other government agencies got to do their thing.
That'll be huge. That will be huge.
Yeah. So that DEA announcement accepting the recommendation is going to be a huge pop in my mind. Is it the end of the road? Hell no. There's a whole lot of other steps to put in place. But God, I'm glad that they're doing it, through their agencies instead of waiting on our stupid senators and representatives.
Yeah, 100%. Well said.
We also have the lawsuit out there now that, they're going to have to respond to, but, lawsuits could take a long time. But, I think our government agencies like the White House and even the House representatives and senators, they don't want to see the courts do their damn job that they have missed out on doing for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So I love the lawsuit being out there just to put additional pressure on everybody else to act.
Agreed. Keep things simple, right?
There's nothing simple in this industry.
I know there isn't, but well, I got to admit, this is a lot of information, more than what I was anticipating, obviously, going into this portion. But Anthony, Ben, this has been a pretty incredible feedback from what we've received here today, don't you think?
Yeah, it's been great. Dan, I hope I sincerely hope you're right on that predicament. Let's see what happens. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. And a nice gift from your CEO. He comments, as a free gift for U.S. citizens this Sunday, we will provide an extra hour to sleep. You are welcome. Thank you, Noah. Don't forget
a good man.
Talks back an hour. Dan, it's been appreciated. Are we going to be seeing you at MJ Biz in Vegas later this month?
We are not heading out there this year. We've been out there the last couple years, but overlaps with the board meeting in DC, and we're just going to pass on it.
Yeah. Well, let's see how things go. More importantly, it's stay in touch, and appreciate you logging on to the podcast here today. But I hope, obviously, a lot of our viewers got some insightful information. But this has been great.
Yeah, have me on again. I'm always happy to talk about educating on the inner workings of the fund.
Okay. I'd love to talk to you about MSOX next time, because that's one thing that's out there, and that's going to get interesting if we get this DEA announcement.
That is a thing, and it is interesting.
Yeah, let's say the least.
High risk, high return.
Wow. How about Fridays with Dan, presented by Advisor Shares at 4:25? I think that would be a great segment every single week. Let our viewers decide on whether they want that. Listen, tell the crew we say hi, and we'll let's hopefully run into you before the end of the calendar year. But I appreciate you jumping on. Okay.
Always enjoy it. Thanks, guys.
All right,
thanks, sir.
Dan. All right, this is the TDR Traded Black podcast on the Benzinga Television Network. That was interesting, huh?
Yeah, it was good.
That was very
good.
I
did not expect that. I sincerely hope Dan is right. If anybody's hearing things in the industry, being where he is and being what he does, it's Dan. So let's hope for the best.
Yeah. You guys want to get into the headlines? We're 32 minutes into this, or do you guys want to go jump into the daily movers? I guess we could touch on it.
You know what? Why don't we talk about Cybin? At least do that.
We should talk about Cybin. That was some pretty compelling data, to say the least, yesterday. Thanks, Mitch, for shifting down to our next headline. But wow, these results were like, you're hoping for something good, and they exceeded, I think, all expectations. What were some of the notable things that caught your attention, Ben?
Yeah, these were absolutely fantastic results. CYB003 at the 12 milligram level demonstrated a 53.3% response rate versus 0% for placebo, and that produced a reduction in MATTERS scale, which is sort of the benchmark scale used for depressive symptoms. It measures like 10 different things.
Yeah,
it reduced it over 50%. So the result, the difference between that and when they first started out was over 14, which is a huge result for that scale. And this was only a single dose as well. And they have a 16 milligram dose that they're going to do upcoming. These were just the interim results. So when I look at this, I think it's absolutely fantastic results. Congratulations on Doug Drysdale and team. Knocked it out of the park.
Yeah.
And what can you say? They could be the leader in the psilocybin space for assisted therapy.
When you look at that share purchase agreement, a Compass of 150 million, you add in all the warrants, it's north of 250. Did you have a look at some of the comparisons as to what their phase 2 trial results were in comparison to Cybin's? Did either one of you?
No, I didn't know.
No, did you, Ben, by chance, or no?
I didn't do a direct comparison, but I just judge this on their own. I mean, there are going to be some differences in the trial structure and the design of it, but I mean, on the face of it, I mean, these were just fantastic results, and I look forward to the full data set coming out later this year. These were just the interim results, again, at the lower dose.
Yeah. Let's switch now to our next. And you brought up an interesting point on the portion with Dan, Anthony. It's how the DEA has proposed a considerable surplus to originally establish 2023 production quotas of both cannabinoids and psychedelics towards supporting preclinical and clinical research. If you read between the lines here, this is actually encouraging stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. It was great to see, and it's kind of like a canary in the coal mine. I mean, you've got the DEA looking at THC via the HHS reco. Then you've got an appeal going for psilocybin to go from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. And then on the backs of this, there's about 150% increase in the requested quota of psilocybin, psilocin, Delta-9 THC, and then they have just marijuana.
What's that tell you?
Well, I mean, that tells me that they're loading up stock for research.
Yeah.
That's good. That means that the Biden administration, that means that the powers that be are looking into research on these drugs, which if we ever really want to get to the end goal, the research needs to go through.
Yep.
on a medical level. It needs to get done. It's getting done. And the fact that they're upping the requested amounts makes me think that they're actually moving on this stuff.
All positive signs in the right direction. You can only stay optimistic if you look at things long term. Okay, let's shift now to Pennsylvania. The House Committee is holding a marijuana legalization hearing as lawmakers consider state-run stores. Ben, so how exactly do you think is the Pennsylvania House Committee approaching this issue? And you're shaking your head, Anthony. You're like, this is not a good idea.
I'm going to let Ben go first, but I think it's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think this is one of the few states where they have an initiative that doesn't involve the referendum process, so it doesn't go to a ballot initiative. So there's been a Senate bill introduced, and now they're doing hearings in their legislature. So I think this is a positive sign that that things are progressing forward. I know former Governor Tom Wolf wanted to pass a recreational cannabis, but it never got to him. Republicans control the legislature there, and they still don't have enough votes apparently. So the fact that we're getting these hearings, we're getting a lot of expert testimony and people in these hearings. So hopefully this is the first step towards a march where this bill can be signed by the governor, and recreational cannabis comes to Philadelphia. There's a lot of MSOs that are exposed there.
Yeah, but what are the implications of a state-run cannabis store? Like, I would assume it's a similar model like what you're seeing in like Canada with like the OCS and the BC Cannabis Commission and stuff like that provincially in Canada.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the inner workings of the state-run model. I know
because that's what comes to mind with me first when I hear state-run cannabis store.
You run for the hills.
Yeah, I don't want to see states running any sort of cannabis enterprise. I don't think states. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I don't think any states in the U.S. there's no state-run liquor stores. So I mean, I don't want to see the states get involved. I mean, I'd love to see adult use cannabis in Pennsylvania. I mean, we use it as a main part of our thesis for a lot of the growth that's going to come into these businesses when you see adult use conversion in PA. But I don't want to see the state owning the stores.
Well, in Canada, they have the state running, some of the stores, but also working in conjunction with the private sector. So it actually works okay in terms of distribution. It's not like they have a monopoly like they do on alcohol, for example. No. But they have both. So maybe this is in the framework of a state-run store and allowing the MSOs or the cannabis operators to operate their own stores as well.
Yeah.
Oh, apparently they have state-run liquor stores in New Hampshire. But yeah, I mean, just on headline, it's not something I need to look into it more, but it's not something I'd support on face value with state-run cannabis.
Break this down. We'll reach out to Jason Wild and see what he has to say. Okay, this concludes our first segment, Into the Wire, basically outlining all the headlines. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast portion with Dan Ahrens, some insightful information as you're listening to the TDR Trade to Black podcast here on the Mazenga Television Network. All right, let's shift now to segment 2, which is our daily movers. Let's bring in our first stock of the day, Numinous Wellness, psychedelic company. This is a company that needs no introduction, has a lot of attention amongst the psychedelic sector among investors, but lately, Ben, this is a stock that's been hit hard like most stocks in this overall sector.
Yeah, it's been hammered. It was down over 60% from the MDMA assisted therapy highs that when MAPS came out with that MAP2 data, gangbuster results for phase 3 results from that readout. And of course, they're affiliated with it. They do have a relationship with them. If most of it's anecdotal, but they have a relationship and they would benefit from MDMA assisted therapy. I'm watching it not because it's really moved a lot in the past couple of days. It really hasn't. It's been flat, but coming off that 60% drop, I happened to be watching level 2. There was a huge 2 million share order that came in at 10.5 cents on the Canadian side, and that set the floor. So this thing had just been dripping down, constant selling, not a lot of buying at all, selling into the bid. It had dropped down. People started to panic. It got towards that 10-cent range, which is on a market cap basis what they paid for Novamind a couple years ago. It was around that $26.5 million range. And then someone said, no more, and put a 2 million share bid at 10.5. And then, shorts covered or people bought in, and it hasn't moved since. So I'm watching it to see if it's kind of stabilizes here, if it kind of tests that bid level. And then, who knows, maybe Maps with the comes out with their share deal that there was reported by the Wall Street Journal in June. And, perhaps we can get some traction here.
You think shorts looking to cover, as they said, no more to set this benchmark?
I think it's possible. I think, anything in psychedelics hasn't got a lot of traction, and there's some challenges there. And, I think people expected a more robust news flow. It's been about 2 months since those results came out, and there hasn't been many press releases. So everything moves on news. Without that, it's been dripping down, but somebody set the floor, and, let's see what happens to see if that catalyst table actually presents itself going forward.
All right. Next up, we have, as I scroll through my notes, is it Air Wellness that we looked at, Anthony, right now?
Yeah, Air's one of the stocks that I'm looking at right now. I mean, I know I was looking at it before. I do firmly believe this is a net positive. Their financial situation is at least on solid ground until the end of 2026.
Yeah.
There's no question marks around the debt. It's a big amount of debt. $400 million is a large amount of debt. At the end of the day, carrying the debt service for the next 3 years and then having the option to convert it, it's not the worst deal I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch to see how the stock performs over the next couple of days. Most notably, I'm looking forward to their earnings report, because there's actually going to be commentary around this. You can bet on the earnings call. I'll start to seriously look at the stock after that. That being said, they're in Ohio, they're in PA, they're in Virginia, on Ohio, PA, Florida, big adult use conversion catalysts in those markets. My thesis really hasn't changed on Air.
Yeah. Well, volatile stock, as per Dan's comments, and a springboard. It could go either way in a hurry right now. And that obviously was demonstrated back in September. But interesting to see what their earnings will do. Okay, next up, Ben, we have, I'm not sure what you have on your back end. Oh, we got Solana. We'll go to you, Anthony. It's a stock that we actually haven't talked about for quite some time. But why is this stock getting your attention right now?
It's not a stock, it's crypto.
Sorry, my apologies. Crypto.
So Solana's up around 35% on the week. They're up around, I think, 12% on the day. I got in at around, I think, $32. It's sitting at, I think, 42.16 right now. The reason why I'm interested in Solana is it's about 17x cheaper on a market cap basis than Ethereum. Their DeFi ecosystem is starting to pop off with Marinade Finance. Their TVL, or total value locked, which is the amount of tokens that are staked in a protocol, exploded this weekend.
Yeah.
I think Solana is going to catch a bid here. Crypto's starting to wake up. Bitcoin is now well over 34,000, and it's been staying there. Ethereum's back over 1,800. Solana was, I think, around 240 at the highs. It even could have hit 300 on the run that we had a couple of years back. I like it here, and I'm buying Solana right now.
Why do you think it's so much cheaper than Ethereum?
Well, I mean, it's just a function of the use cases, the ecosystems. Ethereum's the gold standard as far as building it on chain. Solana's kind of been Ethereum's, let's say, bastard child for the last couple of years, and it takes time to get users on chain, and then it also takes time to get dApps and use cases built on these blockchains.
Similar to the cannabis space and potentially psychedelics, but this space is starting to look like it could have a big resurgence come 2024, don't you think?
Crypto as a whole?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the resurgence has already started with the Bitcoin ETFs.
Yeah.
Crypto's catching a bid in a strong way right now.
Yeah. All right, last stock, the cannabis company holding CBST, which trades on the CBOE and on the OTC CBSTF. Ben, what did it do today? Because this stock was it down 30% out of the bell on Monday. It recovered, and it's now end of day Wednesday. So where do we sit?
Yeah, we talked about this on the last one. We were watching it, and I'm still watching it. And part of the reason is, despite the bounce off about the 36-cent level in on this SIBO, it went up to about 56 cents. So it caught a nice bounce. Despite that, the RSI, the relative strength index, is still very low on this. It's still about 13 to 14 level. So anything under 20 is considered very, very weak and very, very ripe for oversold and ripe for a reversal. So we did have partially that, and it was down again today. It hit 42 and a half, 43, so it was down like 13%. And it caught a little bit at the end of the day today, but it's still very oversold. And with earnings coming out on November 14th, with the Ohio ballot, results should be known in and around November 7th, and they're beneficiary of that. It could possibly see another oversold bounce here. So I'm not acting on it yet. I'm just watching it, but RSI is still very oversold.
Duly noted. See how this performs as we check back in on Friday. Okay, this is the second segment. Daily Movers here on the TDR Trade of Black podcast here on the Benzinga Television Network. I'm your host, Shad Dales, lead financial writer Benjamin A. Smith, along with TDR contributor Anthony Verrill. So big takeaways. I think the biggest thing off the top is Dan Ahrens provided some pretty good insight. And as I hinted about January 1 and how he might step into the overall industry as we head into 2024, and his response was, I don't think I'm going to take that long. So that was a rather interesting soundbite within the podcast here today, as well as you touched on, Ben. Cybin's phase 2 data, incredible for the industry and really for that company moving forward. Air Wellness restructures their debt. And our daily movers for today highlighted was Air Wellness, Solano, Numinous Wellness, and the Cannabis Company Holdings. We're not going to do this today, but maybe our final segment should just be you guys with your deep thoughts, takeaways for 3 minutes as you go on rants. What do you think? You like that idea?
All for that.
I'm not prepared, so maybe next time.
Well, I'm just seeing some of the comments. Anthony is a beast. Absolutely agree. He's a monster. I'm getting a monster t-shirt for you, brother. All right. Anyways, this has been great. Hopefully, maybe tonight we announce a World Series winner, Game 5. That should be an interesting game.
I would be betting on the Rangers.
Dan said he had to run because he's got tickets for Game 5 of the World Series tonight. So best of luck to all the Rangers fans out there. But more importantly, hope you liked, obviously, the podcast here today. Hope you got some compelling information. Feel free to leave a comment below and let us know if there's anything that you want to learn more of. So the whole point in this podcast is to educate you people on the emerging industries that we're in, and by featuring the best thought leaders in the space. As usual, all views of the Trade of Black podcast, the guests on this podcast, are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions expressed by us or guests as investment advice. And the views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. All right, gents, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll check back with you later this week.
Thanks. Talk soon.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching. And if you want to learn more about the emerging industries that we cover, then leave a comment below and let us know who you want us to interview, the questions you want asked, and the information that you want to learn. We want to hear from you. As usual, click on that bell for all notifications to get the latest information. Share this video with your network, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.